Hello, welcome. We're here today with Kate Conklin, musician, vocalist, performer, educator extraordinaire. Thank you so much, Kate, for agreeing to answer some questions for us.
My pleasure. It's so wonderful to be with you.
Okay, so to start things off, why don't you tell us a bit about your background, both as performer and educator?
So my background as a performer is always as a singer. Probably like a lot of us, I sang from the time I was very wee, and have been fascinated by what the human voice does, both subjectively in terms of vibrations in my own body and the effect it has with communicating with other people. And then, of course, learning about what other people's instruments can do. And so as a singer, I got really interested in things that I would hear that I had no idea how these sounds were being produced. And that led to various forms of study, but it really always centered around what is the human instrument capable of, and then more specifically, what is my instrument capable of? So that really had, it led to jazz and free improv, and where I went to school, I really went there because they had Javanese and Balinese gamelan and monkey chant, which is Kechak, and North Indian Hindustani singing and South Indian drum syllables, and that, all of that to me is how you get to know your own instrument, but also see what's possible that isn't necessarily in your culture already. Mm-hmm. So I actually came to classical singing as a way of developing my instrument. It was not that my first love was opera. It was that my first love was voice, and whatever it could do, I was interested in. And so I never thought, oh, I'm going to be a classical singer for sure. That's what I'm going to do. In fact, I pretty much knew I wasn't going to do that. I did more of that than I would have expected. But I started off, my first gigs were jazz gigs. And then my first band that I performed with before I went to music school was a sort of a klezmer ska punk Eastern European band. And so we were doing tunes in 13 and 11 and 9 and all that kind of thing. So for me, going into classical training was really kind of wild, compared to what I was used to, but also it was just another way to see, well, what can the instrument do? And also, how do I protect myself? How do I go forward in an informed way so that I can do all the things I want to do? And that was never a known quantity for me. I never knew, well, I want to do this, this, and this. My guiding paradigm has always been, I want to do a lot of things. I don't know to what extent new things will come up, but I want to be able to respond to those when they do. So that was my sort of my singing. And for me, the educational part, they're both very tied together for me. I would never want to just teach or just perform. I have had periods of my life where I've just performed, and I managed to sneak in teaching even then. The way that both of those things are creative and collaborative and about communication and sharing, I've just always thought those two things for me were both essential.
That's awesome. I actually had, as long as I've known you, I had no idea that you had started out with all these different types of singing other than classical. I mean, I know you studied classical in school. I didn't realize you studied all these other things as well, which is really, really fascinating. It's really, and I like the idea of just being available to do whatever you need your voice to do. Having that.
Yeah, well, and my thought is never, oh, I can do that. It's like, I can do some things. Singers, we hear stuff and we can reproduce it. And a lot of us, we think nothing of it. It's like, of course I can do that, but then when you get to a point where you go, oh, I can't reproduce that. Oh, how are you even doing that? Yeah. And then it's like the beautiful challenge of, is that even possible for me to do? I don't know. Let's find out. Even if it's just me falling over my own feet, I'm going to learn a lot in the process, even if I never, I've never performed Hindustani classical Indian singing outside of the institution where I trained. I never got to a level with it where I felt like, yeah, I'm going to take this on the road. But I also didn't think I would get there with Bulgarian singing, and that's the thing I've done the most of in my life. So you never know which frequencies you're going to hone in on that are really great for you that you just didn't know existed, until you did.
Awesome. Let's turn to Alexander technique, which has become a defining feature of your teaching. How did you first encounter the technique, and what inspired you to incorporate it into your performing and your teaching?
So my first introduction to the Alexander technique was probably similar to a lot of people, which is this thing that people talk about and you have no idea what they're talking about. So my voice teacher at the time said to me, well, you're tall, you should do Alexander technique. So for those who can't tell, I'm 6'2". So every time I would go into her studio, she would have one of these, tilting mirrors, and she would have to tilt it to encompass everything, because I was, a full foot taller than most of the sopranos that were in there. And so that's what she said, and I sort of went, okay. And that was how it started. It was just I don't even think she told me anything about it. It was just like, hey, check this out. So I checked it out. And just by the grace of the universe, I happened to end up finding in my area one of the best Alexander technique teachers on the planet. I didn't know that. And it was just great luck. So my introduction to the technique was really sort of, again, I want to be able to do whatever I want to do, when I want to do it, the way I want to do it. Not always certain what that's going to be, but I know it's going to keep going. I'm going to keep finding things. So my ask with the technique was that thing you get when you're on stage and you feel like you're flying. You feel like, the sound is just flowing out of you, and you're really with the audience, and you're all having this incredible communal shared experience. I wanted to have that all the time, and I had it sometimes. And I didn't know if there was a way to sort of access that regularly on purpose. So that was what I said to my teacher when I first started working with her. This is what I want to do. Does this do this? And she said, well, yeah, it really does. And she was right. So this is Eileen Troberman, by the way, and she's in San Diego, and she's absolutely incredible. And so she was my first teacher. Thank everyone, thank everything. And so that became one of those things that, for me, Alexander technique is a very practical tool that you use to get what you want. And I would actually say this started earlier when I became familiar with the work of Fritjof Capra, he wrote the Tao of Physics, and he's a physicist among other things. And I became familiar with him around, I think I was about 16. And what he, talks about systems theory and the way that the entire world is really a connection of interrelated relationships, and that you can't really talk about a complex system without talking about all of the interrelated things within that system. So that's a very different worldview than the sort of Newtonian, there are these building blocks and it's reducible. So certain things are reducible, but life, the aliveness that you and I have, the aliveness of the plants behind me and the plants behind you, those are complex systems. And so they don't reduce down to, little bits and parts. So that was actually probably my primer of understanding that how everything works affects the entire system. So then when I found Alexander technique, it was like, oh, and this is a practical, boots on the ground way to use that idea in your life for performing specifically, and also for anything else you want to use it for. So that was really how I came to it. And then the sort of second phase of that was when I was singing with Cirque Du Soleil. So I was in, doing O, which is their water show in Las Vegas for, 2 years. And it was 10 shows a week. So 2 shows a night, 5 days a week. Yeah. And it's such an interesting lab in a way, because for us at the time, we had a full house every show. We were 99% sold out, which was such a miracle. But so I always had a crowd to play with and work with, and I always had this huge cast of incredible people to interact with and watch and respond to. And I really sort of felt like my job was to help them do their job and have that reciprocally. And then also with the audience having that whole universe together. So it really came down to, I was using the Alexander technique in my work every night, every show, every phrase. And what would start to happen was I would go in and I'd, do my 2 shows and I'd be tired at the end of the night. This makes sense. Mm-hmm. Once I started really applying the Alexander technique in my performing, I would go home feeling lighter and more energized after 2 shows. And I was so warmed up that it took me quite a while to sort of wind down. I'd go home and I'd want to sing for, I'd done 3 hours of shows and I was like, right, let's practice some Berg, or something. So, and I would do that during the breaks, I'd be doing my Sieben Frühlieder or whatever it was I was working on. So that was quite noteworthy to me. And then, I'm watching and working with people who are the best in the world at what they do. It doesn't really get better. We had many, many Olympic athletes, Olympic medal winning athletes, the people who are innovating. This is what's possible for humans to do. So again, here we come back to, well, what's possible? So I'm watching these people and talking to them about their process and, sometimes seeing their trainings and the notes they're getting and all this sort of stuff. And I started to really wonder, okay, so I'm using this technique and it's helping my performance quite a bit. And my singing is, much easier, much more fluid, and just way more what I want it to be. I'm having fun, I'm communicating, all this sort of stuff. And also down to little things like they had really, really heavy doors. And when I would go, I'd, have my break during the show when I would go use the restroom or get water, whatever I was doing. And I had to open 7 doors in order to get, from the booth, through the hallway, backstage, out of the backstage area, through the hallway, into the dressing room, whatever. And they were really heavy. And I remember having muscle cramps from sort of pushing the door in a certain way. And of course, being tall, I had all kinds of habits. I now realize this was not because I was tall, but it's just because we all have habits of movement. I'd had back pain consistently since I was 14. And when I started using the Alexander technique in my performing, my back pain, it pretty much evaporated. And that was not at all what I had gone to it for, but it was a really nice side effect. So again, you're looking at, well, the thing that makes my performing more vibrant and more fulfilling is also helping my body to work better and giving me more energy. Okay, yeah, we got to pursue this, So then I started wondering about all my colleagues and going, okay, so would this work for them? It's working for me, but I am not a high diver. I am not an acrobat. So how does it work for that? So then I really sort of made a study of it, and I became so fascinated and curious that I really just had to leave the circus, train as an Alexander technique teacher, and learn how to work with people who are the best in the world. And I didn't know if I was going to be able to do that, but had to find out.
That's super fascinating. That's really fascinating. A lot of us, we experience Alexander technique. Usually in school, someone will throw out the word. Sometimes you have classes available, sometimes you don't, sometimes programs offer it. How does your approach to Alexander technique differ from other programs or teachers or schools?
So the way that I use the technique, and I of course believe that this is what the technique was invented for, and I have some good backup for that. But you know, it's just like anything else. Different practitioners, different students of the technique who then go on to teach, they have their own areas of skill, they have their own strengths and their own interests. So some people use it more in a rehabilitation kind of a context, and some people use it more, you know. For me, I work with people who want to do stuff. And so for me, the Alexander technique is about what do you want to do and how do you want to do it? And so, you know, it's interesting. I was reading Sharon Salzberg quote about meditation, and she said, meditation isn't so you get better at meditation. Meditation is so you get better at life. And that is how I see the Alexander technique. Alexander technique is there to help you do other things you care about. So we don't do Alexander technique in order to get better at Alexander technique. We use it as a tool to do the stuff that we really, really care about. Now, for the people I hang with, that's going to be performing. But it's also going to be whatever else they do in their life, picking up their grocery bags, picking up their kids, walking their dog, running, you know, running a marathon, whatever it is. So you can use it for any of that. But the way that I work with it is it's about action. It's about, again, the whole system. If I can bring my whole system into a coordinated relationship with itself and with my surroundings, now I can choose, what do I want to do with that? If I have, you know, if I have an amazing dexterity with my voice, now I can go, okay, what do I want to do? Well, today I want to do some free improv. Well, today I want to do flamenco. Today I'm going to do some fado. If I have that relationship with my whole self, what do I want to do? Oh, you know, I really want to do this trill with this incredible delicacy and precision. Let's see how I can use my entire optimal coordination that we all have as humans. We all have this amazing human design. So it's a matter of coming into harmony with that and then choosing, which is why I love working with artists, because artists like choices. They want freedom. Not all of them, but the ones I hang with. They want freedom. They don't want someone to say, well, this is what you should do. They're artists because they have things they want to do. And so it's really used, the way that I go about it, the actual, you know, nuts and bolts of it is you bring yourself into optimal coordination so that you can either do something with purpose, so do something in a particular way for some reason, or for play, which is I want to find out what else is possible. So play and purpose tend to be the greatest things. I don't, a lot of people get mentioned, they hear about Alexander technique because they have an injury or they have, you know, repetitive stress or something like that. And it absolutely works for that. The way that I frame it is that that is a byproduct that will happen en route to you getting what you want artistically and from your life. Because though pain can be a very effective catalyst, I do not find it to be a very sustaining motivator. Because you're gonna get out of pain. And if that was all you wanted, now what do you do? It's like, what? So I always encourage people if they're interested in, you know, I want to get rid of tension, or I want to have my breath just be there for me. I mean, that's a big one for singers and wind players. I don't want to have to be laboring my breath or thinking about it in a non-organic sort of a way. I just want it to be there. So, okay, so why? I mean, I can understand why, but what are you going to do with that? Let's assume you get that, because you will. So what are you going to do with that now that you have it? Oh, I'm going to play more expressively. Great. Why do you want to play more expressively? And then getting to the root of why do we do what we do? And then it's not arbitrary. Then it's not I'm sitting here doing meditation because my meditation teacher said do meditation. This is my technique. This is my idea. And it's because I want to choose. And I have some ideas about that.
It adds the creativity back into it and back into why we do what we do. We're not just using the technique to get better technically. We're using it for a much bigger picture than that.
Right. That's exactly it. It is a creative act. Technique is a verb, not a noun. It's a verb, it's a living system. And what technique I use, and by the way, I define technique as just whatever tool I use to do what I want to do. And that's a pretty broad definition, but as a performer, I want all of that available to me. And if I have any sort of, designs on the artists I work with, it's that I want them to have that available for them so that I can see what they want to make. What do they want to do with this aria? What do they want to do with this dance piece? I know what I want, but I'm only one person. So it's about that availability and having all of the doors, your technique, your performance desires, not just, we made a decision a long time ago, I'm going to perform. I don't really remember why, but it seemed important at the time. It's like if you go on stage and you know exactly why you care about performing, you are going to light some chairs on fire. And as the audience, I am going to be with you, right? So I do this because at some point I decided to do it. We can take a second look at that and as you're saying, reignite that creativity, which is already there. This is something that's really key about all life forms. All living systems are inherently creative. That's what growth and evolution and cells dividing, that's what that is. We are always creating and learning. Everyone, even people who don't think they're creative because they don't, whittle or paint or whatever it is. Just being alive inherently is creative. So being in touch with that so that your techniques are there for you so that you can do the thing you wanted to do, that's having all of your resources available to you to call up. And what's very, very key for performers is that you have this in a unified process that essentially boils down to yes, go. So when you're on stage, it's not lots of little pieces floating around. It's, I have studied these things, they're there for me, and it is one thought. And by thought, I mean thought movement. It's one gesture of, yes, here we go. And we all know what it's like, when you feel like you're flying or you feel like you caught that perfect wave on stage and you're just like, I'm riding it on home and you're cruising. And so what are the conditions I can create so that becomes the normal? So that's always the way it is,
It's what we all want. It's definitely what we all want.
I think so. It's what I want.
You would want that.
Yeah, and after, I've worked with, I don't know, a couple thousand artists for, what year is it? So, for about 20 years in various forms, seems to be what artists really want. They don't want to be told what to do. They want to access whatever they can. Sometimes because they have a good reason, like because the director said, I need to be able to do this, but often because they just want to keep going with their art. Technique is actually a really creative process. What else can I do? Oh, I can yodel. Cool. I have this, little weird thing I can do with the various cartilages and registration events. That's fantastic. I don't have a good reason for that other than, wow, that's just cool to see what else is possible.
So you've built a teaching platform that's not only super, super unique, but also really accessible and really inviting. For example, your bio reads, Kate Conklin is a vocalist, performer, and educator specializing in the field of extraordinary performance. That really stands out. So what does extraordinary performing mean to you?
Extraordinary performing, I think, came from the circus days, because there's performance and then there's people who do the hardest stuff in the world, right? And so how do you communicate to artists, this is not a method where I have an agenda that I want you to adopt for some, this is about helping you get what you want, period. And any resources I bring to the table, you have access to. So for me, in order to be the kind of voice teacher that I wanted to be, and the kind of singer I wanted to be, I felt I needed the Alexander technique, and I needed a fair amount of fluency with it, because that was the time that it gave me the greatest access to my whole self and transcending those plateaus we sometimes get into. So extraordinary performance has a lot to do with the intention behind it, sometimes the level at which you are doing it, not always. You know, it's interesting because one of the things I talk about a lot is working with professional performers. And I don't mean professional like employed. That's not what I'm talking about. I mean someone whose skills and dedication and willingness to engage is at an extraordinary level, meaning beyond the ordinary. So what you do is extraordinary performance. It's beyond what most people are doing, and it's beyond what many performers are doing. So that's really one of the reasons I make that clear, is because that's my specialized skill set, and not everybody can do that. Not everybody understands what it is to perform. And I've certainly had, I don't spend much time with them, but I've certainly had exposure to Alexander technique teachers or vocal coaches or, whomever, name your studio, who don't really understand what it is to perform and what's required. I definitely have had experiences where people want me to be calm, and I'm like, so it's Puccini. We're going to need some wind here. This is not, I can't be a wet noodle. This is not. So there's all these things that are misnomers. Performers themselves will say, well, I like to be really relaxed when I'm on stage. That's not the accurate description of what's actually happening with us metabolically, psychophysically. It's extraordinary. It's special. It's heightened. So we don't want to be excessively tense or worried, but it is excitation. And to try to do something other than that, you won't get what you want, because you can't be relaxed and excited at the same time. You have to pick one. Mm-hmm. So extraordinary performance for me is beyond what you could do on your own and beyond what most people probably are doing. And those things that push the boundaries of what we know is possible for humans in a performance capacity.
So speaking of extraordinary performing, last year you created a series of online courses for the specific purpose of extraordinary performing. Can you share with us how you came to conceptualize the new courses and what inspired you to embark on this super creative initiative?
I think you could characterize my journey so far in life as a series of things that I wonder if they're possible, and once I wonder about it, I sort of have to find out. And that, from going to Bulgaria and singing with the Bulgarian women's choirs there, to joining the circus, to, there tend to be things that come along that I think, oh, if you could do that. I mean, I don't know if you can, but, so that's been my entire trajectory, is just a series of those things. So with this, it was one of those moments of allowing my imagination to roam and go, God, okay, if I could do anything, this is what I would do. And the reason that I want to do what we ended up doing, was a couple of things. One was, there are certain things that I wish everyone knew, particularly performers, that come up again and again and again for everyone from beginners to the highest level, that there are just some things that would be really helpful if everybody knew and had access to. And so I thought, you can pay me for lessons to tell you all of these things, or we could do this in a much more economical, potent way, which is, what's the sort of easiest, most direct delivery system, so that we're all sort of starting with a really nice foundation of, oh, here's how human movement sort of works. Here's how thought works, when I'm asking for something specific in my singing or my conducting or whatever, here's how I actually get my body to respond to that. It would be great if we all just sort of had that. And then we could get to the point where now we're really doing creative collaboration. And then, of course, it was inspired by you. It was inspired by the artists I work with who are incredibly creative, not easily satisfied, meaning they always are curious about something else. They want to keep going with their art and their work. And who we are is we're a bunch of really creative, really curious, far-flung people from everywhere to Australia to Norway to Japan to, East Coast, West Coast, US. And the fantasy is, well, what if we could all be together? Because in my experience, being with a cohort that is operating at a similar level of seriousness, commitment, and artistry, and has the ability to observe the nuance of what you're doing. Because if you got up and sang, for one cohort of people, they would just go, she's amazing. And that would pretty much be, that would be about all the detail you would get. But if you get up for a group of your colleagues, they can go, wow, that was amazing. Did you notice how she did this gossamer, sort of decrescendo right here? There's going to be a lot more detail. And so when you are wanting to keep learning and finding out what's possible, having that sort of feedback can really help you find out, well, how is this playing? Oh, wow, I found that really moving, and they found that really moving as well. So, and here's how that actually played out. So it had to do with creating something for the people that I already work with, and then inviting more people to come into that space. Because, if you have to live where I live and work with my persnickety schedule, I'm going to get to very few people. And so working as a group allows us all to learn exponentially. And then the other thing that, was a question, but that really bore out through the process was the value of going through it with other people who are consummate to your level of performing, your interest level, and developing together and having that community and that common language. Because what we do is we have, you take the course, you have pre-recorded lectures, you have coachings with me and everybody else. You also have access to me through email so that you can always ask questions. And then we have a Facebook group, which is where a lot of the action happens. Because people, we work things in group and then they go, okay, so then the next day I went and did an audition and here's what I used and here's what happened. And then everybody gets to kind of still be on each other's journey. And that was, I didn't know how big of a component that would be, but the feedback I've gotten was, I don't even really care what we're doing next. I want to be with this group, so it really created this global, really extraordinary way for us to all be together.
Do you think that's some of the advantage of doing these as a fully online course, as opposed to in-person group meetings, that you have access to this really diverse, this really interesting group of people that can all agree to meet at the same time, no matter where they are on the earth?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I wanted to create something that worked for the people that we actually are, so when we, the core of the Alexander technique is cooperating with your brilliant natural design so that you can do something you care about. Well, that means also cooperating with reality. And the reality is none of us can do every Tuesday night at 6 p.m. on every week. It's like, in one city. No, none of that has anything to do with the life of a professional performer. That, you may have periods of that. You may have, well, I'm off, I'm between shows or whatever, but really, it really had to do with, I've been teaching online for years now. And I also learn online because I just, this is the way I am. I want to work with the people I want to work with. I don't want to work with the people who are in my neighborhood necessarily.
Yeah.
Just because they're in my neighborhood. And this is a big, I think a lot of people bump on this. The model especially for voice work, is you have your weekly coaching and you have your weekly lesson, or, your monthly lesson, or whatever it is. I don't study that way. And I stopped studying that way when I worked with my Alexander performance coach. And the coach I currently work with is Kathy Madden. And I started working with her, and it's a totally different rhythm. It can be whatever, when I go, oh, I love Kathy's take on this. I'm getting ready to do this TED Talk, and I just want to run the whole thing for somebody who shares, some of my aesthetic needs, some of my values, but can also just go, yeah, I got that, or yeah, I didn't really get that, or whatever. Not with an agenda of, we do this exercise and then we work this, and it's like, I'm a professional. I don't need that. I can generate my own exercises at this point. It's not something I need someone else to, not that I won't get ideas and explore, but at some point I thought, I'm learning more online in a variety of arenas, both, performance coaching, as well as physics courses, as well as economics courses. I mean, I do a ton of this stuff, and I just thought, oh, right, this is an incredible tool that, because of the tradition, people are not availing themselves of, and that's foolishness. It's here for us for whatever we want to use it for. People use it, it's just like the Alexander technique. It's not good, it's not bad, it's just a tool. So what do you want to do with it? Well, I want to use the internet to hang out with you once a week when we're, when we're, in session, and, all of that sort of stuff. So a really important component of this, and I always invite people to check out, an online workshop I'm doing, which actually, before I forget, we will have one in February. And Modern singers, listeners, viewers, subscribers, will have a special discount code. So there will be upcoming events, and I'm going to give discounts for Modern Singers. So it'll be kateconklin.com/modern singer, and then you'll see everything that's available. But if you haven't worked online, or if you haven't worked with an Alexander technique teacher online, or you haven't had a good experience working online, then you don't have a model for it. So what I invite people to do is, try a workshop. We do a 1 hour, 75-minute workshop, something like that. What is specific about the way that I work, and this is, again, what I learned from Eileen and also the tradition that Kathy comes from, is we're looking very specifically at your entire movement pattern. So we're watching and listening. We're listening to what you want. We're looking at how you're moving, how you're going about doing it. We're discussing it with you. We are not guiding you. We're not manipulating you. We're not moving you around, and we're not telling you what's what. We're saying, what do you want? What are you currently doing to do that? And then we see how that plays out. And then together we come up with strategies that are using what you already know how to do. So that's the other thing that's really important. This is about accessing the skills you already have, not rewiring and discombobulating you so that you're like, now I don't know how to breathe anymore. It's like, no, you know how to breathe. You know how to sing. You know how to perform. How do we just get all of you, every little cell of you, saying yes to that? Because we all have ways in which we have little, resistances and little things that are getting in the way. We don't need to focus on that. We just need to get you on the path you want to be on. Now, if your way of teaching is highly manipulative, we can't do that online. But I teach, and this is for people who have worked with me both in person and online, they can all attest to this. I teach the same way in person. I don't come move you around. I talk to you, and you instigate your own process. So it's very much about empowering you and giving you what you need according to what your interests are, not what I think you should know right now, but like, what are you asking about? We can do that, It's all gonna come out in the wash, because optimal human coordination is optimal human coordination. It's not gonna be, oh, you're singing a high note? Oh, in that case, your skull is designed differently. No, it's all the same. This is the elemental aspect of peak performance and Alexander technique and, human biology. Our design is relatively universal. And if you can cooperate with that, you can go in any direction you want to go. So the online component, I certainly, before I sign people up for courses, I offer phone calls and, we sort of chat about it, because there is, I notice if you're not familiar with it, you don't know how it works, you don't know whether it works for you, etc. But the core of how I teach is based on omnisensory observation and collaboration. And so, can I hear what you're doing? Yes. Can I see what you're doing? Yes. Can I ask you about what you're doing? Yeah. So that there's nothing missing really, other than us being able to touch each other. And of all the things that I would be willing to do without, that's the one I'm willing to do without. And it also, I mean, the thing that I've received, I've heard over and over again, especially just in the last couple of months, as people are giving me feedback about what they've done over the year, is, wow, I realized I know how to do what I want to do. And Kate, I don't need you there. It's great, we can catch up or whatever, but I don't need you there saying, oh, do this now. I know how to do it, and all I have to do is go, well, what do I want to do? Okay, I'll do this. Oh, look, there it is. But that's it, And you don't need to be in the same physical space with me to have that.
So you have a workshop coming up in February. You have some new courses coming out.
I do.
Can you tell us about those?
Sure. So the workshop will be 3 tools for extraordinary performance. And that is, sort of a quick start to sort of see how the whole system works. So how we work with the design of the human body, and how we have that cooperate with your artistic desires, and then how we actually include the audience in what we're doing, so that you have all of that synergized, ready to go in a whole, in a unified process. This is something that I've also been told a lot, especially from singers, but from all performers, that we all have all these things we've learned. And like, I took that workshop and I did this program and I, learned this technique from this teacher, and this coach is all about this and whatever. So you have all these sort of things that you can do. And then it becomes like, so which things do I do? Because I can't think about all of them all at once. So I've got all this stuff. And so a big part of what we're doing is we're synergizing all of that into one process, so that when you go to perform, it's simple, it's clear, and it's what you want. So it includes all of that complexity, but you're not going off in different directions trying to, catch all the different butterflies. The butterflies come to you, as we say. So that's the workshop in February. I think I'm gonna have one starting in February and starting in March. Check the website, kateconklin.com/modern singer, to see how this timing actually plays out. So what we'll do is a 1-month course that is sort of a standalone that can also serve as an introduction to the next 8 weeks of a course. So we have the foundations course for professional singers, and that is everything from how your respiratory mechanism works, to how do you include an audience, to how do you record, how do you audition, all of that sort of stuff. And I don't mean how do you, like, there is one way. I just mean, here's what we're gonna cover. And what's really fun about that is we're grounding it in always, what is your desire in performing, in singing specifically, if you're a singer. That's our jumping off point, and that's our through line. So that's always our compass. And then we look at, okay, well, how do acoustics actually work? I've been told a zillion different things about vowels. What's actually going on with vowels, and why does it matter to my communing with the audience, right? So looking at the acoustics, looking at the anatomy, looking at, so all of that, but all of it is arranged around, how do I get on stage and do what I want to do? So we're not going off into the land of theory and staying there. We're bringing all of it into practical every time. So in all of the lectures, the way that it works is there's a filmed lecture, and then materials that go along with it, and then we have the live coaching. So in every lecture, you also have practical applications, so that when you come to coaching, you've already played with some of the stuff, you already have some fluency with it, and then we can take that further together. So we have the foundations course, which will be starting in February, March, or possibly both. I may end up doing 2 sections of it. And then in summer, and this was one of those things that purely came out of who I'm working with. The summer course, which I'm calling Glorious Creatures, because that's who we are, it's a project-based course, and it's an 8-week course where you start off getting clear on some kind of intention and goals about what you actually want to do that you think would really improve your life quality. So it could be anything. It could be, I want to audition for 3 different companies, or, maybe the wrong time of year, but, I want to get a recording done. I want to record an album of this, or I want to start an online business, or I want to start exercising or meditating, or whatever it is you want to do that you think, God, this would get me somewhere that would really matter to me. So we help you figure out what that's going to be for the 8 weeks. And then we give you the tools and the support and the community again to be able to do that. So you will have something very concrete at the end where you can go, I made something happen. Wow. So what a lot of times happens is that because we have old stories, we have old models, we have, oh, you couldn't do that, or whatever the things are that we've learned because we're human and we have culture. So, we get stories. There are usually little points where we stop. You're about to start that outline for that thing, and then somehow you just end up on Facebook, or somehow I got to get a cup of coffee, and you just kind of bounce. I call it bouncing. It's just sort of like, boing, I got to go. Something's over there that I have to go do. So it's about helping you just work around those so that you go, oh, okay, I actually can get this done. Because what I've learned is if you spend even 5 minutes on the things that are really important to you, everything else starts to fall into place and you just feel totally whole. And it can be 5 minutes. And if you spend an hour, great. But if you only have 5 minutes, it will matter. It will really, really matter. And it will help you feel like you're on mission. And there's really nothing, that kind of purpose and that kind of momentum that we get in that kind of a course, there's really nothing like it. So that'll be in summer. That'll be June and July.
So a lot of our readers, subscribers, viewers, all of the above, they're interested also in kind of the business aspect of what we do. And a lot of us are freelancers, we're entrepreneurs of sorts. So how would you say branding plays into your work in teaching and performing, and it's kind of one entity?
That's actually really key. You sort of just said it. It is one entity. And when I first started out, I had different websites for different, the Bulgarian singer one, but the opera singer one, because, when people found out that I did, more than one thing, that was very distressing, and back then I think it was more, at present, I sing in 17 languages. And within that, I sing in multiple styles. And I think that's more true for more of us nowadays. It's like, well, why wouldn't I sing, hip hop or something? Like, I have amazing pipes and I want to do it, So it is one thing, and that's really important. A guiding premise for me with branding is, first of all, just what do you want? And I seem to say this a lot. It's a very powerful question for me because I usually know. And sometimes we know, but we don't articulate it even to ourselves. So a question that I might ask someone who's sort of wanting to figure out, like, who am I in the scheme of things or whatever, is I do view that as a more of an emergent quality. I don't necessarily come at it myself. I don't come at it from, I want to seem like this. Again, I'm 6'2", I sing Bulgarian music, I do all this, I don't think I have a nebulous presence, or at least that's not what I've been told. So it's sort of like, okay, well, what are you already sort of like radiating? If you're okay with that, let's just go with that, because that's who you really are if you're, working in where you want to be working. So I just look at, what do I want to spend my time doing, and who do I want to spend my time doing it with? And talk to those people. And that really has to do with finding your smallest viable audience, as Seth Godin would say. Who are the 10 people who I think might be down to do this with me? And if you don't have 10 people, then you maybe don't have a viable thing, but you probably have 10 people. You may not have met them all yet. But what I think is so exciting about this time that we're in is that in many ways, it's the most creative time because there are so many tools available to us. It is so much, you know, you can do something for a while and then you can change, and, you know, you don't necessarily get stuck. You know, film actors are doing television and vice versa. And oh, it's wild, you know, and everybody, it's like, I came up thinking that that made sense. And so when I went into classical training or what, you know, whatever it is, and people are like, oh, you know, I remember I was in a square in Bulgaria during a folk festival. And I was walking down the cobblestone pathway, and I saw someone who knew me, and said, vaguely knew me. And she said, well, I thought you were an opera singer. It was like, what are you doing here? How dare you? You know, and I was like, I do many things, you know, and we all do many things. We are complex and fabulous. So what I love is going, okay, what are all the things I love the most? What if I could do anything? If I knew I would be successful, what would I do? Or if I had total financial freedom, what would I do? Again, you know, it's how I got into teaching at university. It's how I got out of teaching at university. It's how I got into the circus. It's how I got out of the circus. What do I want to do? And is there any way I can see if it's possible? And you can do that with a day job. In fact, that is awesome because you need to pay your bills also. So however you know, we all manage that. I think there's this weird stigma around having a day job. And to me, I'm like, so your day job pays to support you as a life form, but also your creativity. So I, for one, am quite thankful for your day job because I want you to eat, have hot water, and make stuff. You know, so to me, being a professional performer is not about how you get paid. It's about your commitment to what you're doing. That's how I define it. So for branding, I mean, I have a font that I'm in love with that I keep being in love with, so I keep using it. You know, and people who've worked with me 10 years ago are like, oh my God, Kate, Futura, really? You're just going to keep rolling with Futura? I love Futura. So, okay. You know, and I get inspiration from all different fields. I don't tend to follow a lot of singer blogs or Alexander, you know, it's around. But I look at like makeup artists and, you know, fashion magazines and physics communities and, you know, that sort of stuff. Writers, I listen to process things about writers all the time. So I really think from a branding standpoint, at least start off aspirational. Because for me to say, okay, I'm Kate Conklin, I work with the best performers in the world, that ended up being true. But if you had said to me 15 years ago, say that, I would have been like, no, that is, oh my God, I could never, you know, that's, if I really thought about it, if I really listened to my heart and said, what would I, if I could do it, you know, if I was competent, what would I do? That's what was calling to me. So if something's calling to you, you know, why not? And it's so easy to make a website, make a landing page. You don't have to have anything other than a landing page. You know, here's my photo, here's my buy, or here's what you can buy. Just a call to action. What do you want me to do when I get to your site? I want you to click over here. I want you to buy this, or I want you to get to know me so that when I do have something to sell you, you know, it's not a first date. We've met. You know, and I had a big website redesign that took a very long time because every little thing had to be, you know, I had a vision for everything, and I don't recommend that. I don't recommend that, but I did it anyway. And so what my guiding principle with visuals in particular and design is, if I look at it and I go, that's probably a good thing.
Yeah.
So even if I know, well, people like this, or they're into serif right now, or they're into, you know, this is what, if I look at it, there are probably at least 10 other people who are going to go, oh, cool, nature photos, or, you know, whatever it is. So if you satisfy yourself first, as Katharine Hepburn, my namesake, would say, at least one person is happy.
Yep.
Then you see if anybody else is with you, you know?
Exactly.
And it's a very different thing than trying to go brute force, I'm Coca-Cola, I'm trying to appeal to everybody. That's what's beautiful about this. I am so not trying to appeal to everybody. And when I really embraced that, I found my real soulmates. I found the people who became my muses, who became, the people who, when I create stuff, that's who I'm creating it for. And they may or may not participate in one particular thing. But what's happening is we've built together this community of hundreds of performers all over the world who have a lot in common who've never met. And so now we're all starting to meet with the courses.
Do you have any advice for performers, educators, entrepreneurs out there trying to make an impact on this industry in an authentic, meaningful way?
If I could speak to each of them individually, I'd have more specifics. because my question would be, why do you want to make an impact? And I would start where I always start with is, what if I get quiet and I listen to what my deepest self is called to do? What is that? And some of the questions I use to help people discover that, and for myself, are, if I knew that I would be loved, accepted, and flourish no matter what, no conditions, no pretenses, what am I called to do really? I would start with that. Because what I need from my artists is I need them to do what they're called to do. Not because I'm going to do what they do, but because it encourages me to do what I'm called to do. And that may not be clear. I mean, there are a lot of people who are like, I could do about 75 different things and I'm kind of great at all of them and I don't have one. For me, I always have a few on the stove bubbling away, because I don't want to just do Bulgarian music. I also want to do Sevda, and I also do want to do Fado. And there's always multiple creative streams, which I think is really important. If you only do singing, it's gonna get stale at some point. So have a little windowsill garden, or learn to cook, or, do something where when you don't feel like singing, you have somewhere for that energy to go. In terms of impact, I can't imagine what greater impact you would have other than living fully living who you are in all of its glory and sharing that with us. That doesn't mean there won't be obstacles. It doesn't mean that everybody's going to accept it. But I feel like as a culture, that's where we're going. And it's about time. It's what I love about all the young people I get to hang out with is that they don't have some of the old stories. They didn't grow up with this prejudice or that attitude. And they're sort of like, yeah, that's not even a thing. It's not even, we reject that. That doesn't even exist in our world. And I would say millennials will save the world, because, and because it's not my world or the older generation's world. It's all of our world, and it's especially the world of the young, right? Because that's who's rocking and rolling. So I think, start with yourself. Start with, if I could do anything. Now, that doesn't mean you'll be able to do it. It doesn't mean you will be able to make a living at it. But again, if 5 minutes of your day is spent on woodworking or gardening or whatever it is that feeds your soul, that other 95% of your time, you're going to be a much happier person. You're going to be a better relationship. You're going to have better relationships. You're going to be a better community member, all that sort of stuff. So, and I also think, really, don't be afraid to start really small, because all the things that look interesting in my bio came because of one conversation that led to another conversation that led to, I met someone at a party who loved Cirque Du Soleil, and they didn't even know what I did in it, but they were so excited that they hooked me up with some other thing, or they just remembered me. And 10 years later, you know, they had some reason to get in contact with me or whatever it is. So just being who you are. And, you know, the other thing I would say is don't be afraid to say no when you know it's not right. You know, something just came across my desk, such as it is, my makeshift desk the other day. And I so wanted to say yes to it. And I just thought, this is bananas. It makes no sense the way that this is arranged. And we, you know, kind of worked on getting it to be a little more flexible or be a little more workable. And it was like, you know, I wish this worked and it just doesn't right now. And that's okay. I didn't fail and you didn't fail. It just isn't a match right now. You know, it's like sometimes when you have to have an enchilada, you just have to have one. And then sometimes you're just like, if I never see another enchilada, you know, I need a week of no enchilada, whatever. So I think the fear of missing opportunities, I think we invent that to a large extent. I think the opportunities are the things that actually work for you, not the things that don't work. That wasn't a real opportunity, you know, that was a possibility that really sort of, when I really listened to myself, it didn't really work. But there's always more. And really make stuff. Don't wait to be picked. Don't wait to be cast. You know, if you think about, this is what I always think about. There's some record you listen to or some YouTube video you watch or however you get your music, that the person who made that was not making enough money, was having a really hard day, hard year, hard life. But that track speaks so deeply to you that if that person is still alive, you want to write them a letter. If that person is no longer alive, you want to just talk directly to them and say, you know, you saved me with that. And they made that because they were called to make it, not because they had the best deal or the best contract or, you know, 1 million followers or whatever it was. It was like, that was hard. It was hard what they did. So when you're having that, you think about who's going to need to hear this. If I'm called to do it, there's someone who's going to need to hear it. And think about them when you're making it, because that will pop you out of all of those voices of like, no one really cares, but everybody else is doing something else. But, you know, all that sort of stuff. It's like, you know, when you are on mission, when you're tending your own garden, there's nothing else in the world. It's just between me and my petunias, man. Like, here we are. So, and then you can branch out from there, you know?